All right, let's dive in. You ever look at the news, trade wars, global summits, all that, and feel like you're missing something? Well, there's a kind of secret language that shapes our world, and today we're going to learn it, starting with the biggest question of all.
I mean, really, this is the big one, isn't it? What pushes countries to the brink and what helps them pull back and cooperate? It's the central puzzle that the whole field of international relations is trying to solve.
So, the concepts we're about to unpack, they're not just fancy words. They're the building blocks, the actual ideas that leaders and diplomats use to make sense of the world and, try to shape it. Think of this as your official decoder key. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the classic view, where nations are the main characters. Then we'll get into the high-stakes game of power they all play. We'll see how totally devastating wars forced everyone to look for new rules, how the global economy changed the whole game, and finally, where we are today, in a world that is way, way more complicated than it used to be. So, let's start at the very beginning, with the most fundamental player on the world stage, the nation-state. What's its ultimate motivation? What's its prime directive, if you will? It really all boils down to one core idea: national interest. And at the heart of that idea is one single word: survival. Above everything else, a state wants to protect its land, its government, and its unique culture from any and all outside threats. Seriously, this one idea has been the engine behind centuries of foreign policy. And this quote from Machiavelli, wow, it shows you just how far states are willing to go. It gets at this concept of raison d'etat, which basically means reason of state. The argument is, when a nation's very survival is on the line, the normal rules of morality, they can kind of go out the window. It's a pretty ruthless idea for sure, but it has been used to justify, well, a lot throughout history. Okay, so if a state's goal is to protect its national interest, what's the main tool it uses to get what it wants? The answer is simple, and it has defined international politics for centuries. Power. It's the currency of world politics. Now, we usually think of military might, tanks, jets, aircraft carriers. But it's also economic strength, the power to give aid or slap on sanctions. It can even be psychological, like the power of persuasion or a country's reputation. But at the end of the day, it's all about one thing: getting other countries to do something they wouldn't have done otherwise. It's pretty cool how early thinkers pictured this whole thing. They imagined the world as a collection of individual states, each one like a hard-shelled billiard ball. They're all just rolling around a table. Sometimes they miss each other, and sometimes they collide. Hard. And in this global game of billiards, there's one really important rule. Don't let any single ball dominate the whole table. This is the balance of power. If one nation, think Napoleonic France, gets way too strong and starts threatening everyone, other countries will team up. They'll form a coalition to stop it and, well, restore the balance. It's this constant shifting dance of alliances, all designed to stop any one country from just taking over the whole show. But that old game of power politics led to two of the most devastating wars in human history. The game suddenly seemed not just dangerous, but completely suicidal. The world desperately needed a new way to keep the peace. So, out of the rubble of World War I, this totally radical new idea pops up: collective security. This was the big idea behind the League of Nations. Instead of every country for itself, the new motto was basically all for one and one for all. If any member country got attacked, it would trigger a response from everybody.
And this is the huge difference, right? Balance of power is totally self-interested. You make temporary alliances to protect yourself against a specific enemy. Collective security is way more idealistic. It's this permanent, universal promise to protect the whole system of peace against any bad actor.
Well, collective security didn't quite work out, and the world plunged into the Cold War. That's when a much darker kind of stability took over: deterrence. With both the US and the Soviet Union pointing thousands of nuclear weapons at each other, peace was kept not by trust, but by pure terror. The logic was simple and absolutely horrifying. If you launch your missiles, we launch ours, and we all get wiped off the map. It was a fragile peace, held together only by the threat of total annihilation.
Now, while all this Cold War tension was going on, another revolution was quietly taking shape. And this one wasn't about armies or bombs. It was about markets, money, and a totally new way of looking at the world's economic map.
So this powerful new critique came along called dependency theory. It basically said, hey, this world capitalist system, it's not a level playing field, not even close.
The argument was that the whole system is structured like a pyramid. The wealthy, core countries up top are actively keeping the poorer periphery countries at the bottom, well, poor. They do it by extracting their resources and cheap labor to keep their own economies growing.
This diagram really shows you how it works. So check out the flow. You've got raw materials and cheap labor going from the poorer periphery countries to the rich core countries. The core then uses its factories to turn those raw materials into finished goods, and then they sell those expensive goods right back to the periphery for a huge profit. It creates this cycle where wealth just keeps pooling in the core, and the periphery stays dependent.
And then everything got put on hyperdrive. Globalization. The explosion of global trade and communication tech started to shrink the world fast. A factory closing in Ohio could spark a crisis in a town in Mexico. An idea tweeted from Cairo could start a global movement overnight.
So, this brings us pretty much to today. That old, simple model of independent nations as the only actors that matter, it just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't fit the world that we actually live in. I mean, just look at all the other players on the field now. You've got giant corporations with economies bigger than most countries. You have non-governmental organizations working across borders on everything from human rights to the environment. You have global terrorist networks. And, of course, you have powerful international bodies like the UN trying to write the rules. The old state versus state model, it just doesn't cut it. Which brings us to a much better metaphor for our time. Forget the billiard balls. Instead, picture a massive, complicated cobweb. In this model, everything is connected to everything else. A government isn't just talking to other governments. It's also dealing with corporations, with activists, with international organizations. Every single strand is connected. So let's just put them side by side for a second. The billiard ball model was simple, right? States were the only actors that mattered. Their interactions were basically collisions, and their borders were like hard shells. The cobweb model shows our world today. Countless actors, a dense web of complex connections, and borders you can pass right through. Here's the bottom line. Our whole understanding of how the world works has evolved massively. We've gone from this simple picture of states bumping into each other to a much messier, more complicated, and deeply interconnected reality. And getting that shift is absolutely key to making any sense of the 21st century.
But this leaves us with one last really big question for the future. As new rivalries between great powers heat up, are we snapping back to that old world of hard-shelled billiard balls? Or is our interconnected cobweb just too dense now to ever be untangled? That right there is the big question for our time.